Hello? My sister said. You're just jealous of me, you'll never be like me. So I smiled, took my things, and quietly left without a word. 2 months later she showed up crying at my door. My sister stood there with her usual smirk, shoulders back, chin high, every word dipped in that syrupy tone she'd perfected since we were kids. You're just jealous of me, she said, her voice echoing across the dinner table. You'll never be like me. She smiled sweetly as she said it, like she hadn't just thrown a grenade into the middle of our family's Thanksgiving. But I didn't flinch. Not this time. I looked around the table. My parents were silent, pretending not to notice the tension. My uncle gave a nervous cough. My aunt avoided my eyes. And she? My sister Rachel? She was glowing, like she just scored the winning point in a game she'd been playing her whole life. It had always been like this. Every family gathering was a performance, and I was the unwilling extra in the background of her spotlight. Rachel was the golden child, valedictorian, prom queen, marketing exec before 30. The one who got applause for existing. I was the one who got polite nods and, "Oh, you're still doing that computer thing, right?" Growing up, I thought it was just my imagination. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I wasn't trying hard enough. But as the years went by, it became impossible to ignore. Rachel didn't just shine, she made sure the rest of us stayed in the dark. Especially me. I helped where I could, I kept my head down. When she got into her dream college, I was the one who drove her to campus. When she landed her first big job, I built her website. When her fiancé cheated on her 3 years ago and she moved back home, it was my couch she crashed on. And still, she made sure I knew I'd never measure up. That night, though, when she tossed that insult like it was just another witty one-liner, something inside me changed. I didn't shout. I didn't defend myself. I didn't try to win them over. I smiled. Not sarcastically, not bitterly, just peacefully. Then I stood up, pushed in my chair, and said, "Thanks for dinner." Rachel blinked. "Wait, what?" I walked to the coat rack. "I think I've had enough." "Of what?" She laughed. "You're not seriously leaving." But I didn't answer. I picked up my coat, slipped on my shoes, grabbed my bag from the corner, and as my hand touched the doorknob, I turned around. "For what it's worth, Rachel, I'm not jealous of you." And I left. No one followed me. No one called after me. Just the sound of her fork clinking nervously against her plate behind me. That was the last time I saw any of them for 2 months. The first thing I noticed, after leaving, was the silence. It wasn't dramatic or crushing like in the movies. It was clean. Cold. Like a room that's finally been aired out after years of breathing in someone else's perfume. I went back to my apartment, just a one-bedroom on the edge of the city, nothing fancy, but mine, and I sat on the floor still in my coat. I didn't cry. I didn't rant. I just sat there and let the silence fill in the cracks that had been growing in me for years. No text came that night. No calls. Not from Rachel. Not from my parents. Nothing. I think that was the part that really settled it for me, not the insult, not the years of being sidelined, but the fact that when I walked away, no one ran after me. It told me everything I needed to know. For the next few days, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Some passive-aggressive text from Mom. A voicemail from Dad telling me I was overreacting. A surprise visit from Rachel pretending like nothing happened. But there was nothing. Just peace. So I leaned into it. I took time off work, used up the vacation days I'd been hoarding for no reason. Spent a week in a cabin upstate, just me and a stack of paperbacks I hadn't touched in years. I'd forgotten how quiet my own mind could be when it wasn't constantly defending itself. When I came back, I called an old friend from college, Eli. We hadn't talked in years, not because anything went wrong, just life. He invited me to his game night that Friday. It was a small thing, cards, pizza, good conversation. But I laughed. A real, belly-deep laugh. And no one looked at me like I was the second choice or the disappointment. That night, I updated my resume. By the end of the next week, I had 2 interviews lined up, one of them with a firm I thought was way out of my league. Turns out, I had underestimated myself. Or maybe I had just spent too long around people who were all too happy to underestimate me. I got the job. Better pay. Better title. Better hours. I moved to a new place. A loft with high windows and worn brick and enough space to actually breathe. And then came the part one didn't expect. I didn't miss them. Not even a little. No birthday text came. No holiday invites. Rachel didn't suddenly soften. My parents didn't apologize. But instead of hurting, it felt like freedom. For the first time in my life, I was building something that wasn't tied to their approval. And then, almost exactly 2 months to the day after that dinner, there was a knock at my door. I opened it, and there she was, Rachel. Her eyes red, mascara streaked, hair pulled back like she hadn't slept. Behind her confidence and her gloss and her designer exterior, she looked small. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't invite her in. Not yet. I just stood there, calm, steady, watching the person who once told me I didn't belong finally realize I was the one who had left her behind. She stood on my doorstep like a child who'd lost her mother at the grocery store, eyes wide, hands trembling, pretending not to care that she was falling apart. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Did you want something, Rachel? Her eyes welled instantly. Can I come in? I glanced past her. No luggage, no purse. Just a shattered expression and smudged eyeliner. She hadn't planned this visit. It wasn't a conversation she'd rehearsed. This was desperation. Still, I didn't move. I let the silence stretch between us. Years of buried resentment condensed into one heavy pause. Please, she said softly. I need somewhere to think. That was rich, coming from the woman who once said I wasn't capable of thinking for myself. I stepped aside. You've got 10 minutes. She walked in like she expected warmth, like the version of me she remembered would be waiting with tea and a blanket, and all the old apologies she thought she deserved. But those days were long gone. She sat on the edge of my couch, tense, as if it might bite. Her eyes scanned the apartment, neat, open, confident. It didn't match the image she probably still had of me. That made me smile. This place is nice, she muttered. I didn't respond. She clasped her hands tightly, knuckles white. Kevin left, she blurted, like she couldn't hold it in any longer. He said I was too much. That I always needed to be the center of everything. Her voice cracked. Treat people like background noise. She looked up at me like she expected sympathy. I gave her none. I lost my job last week, she continued. They're downsizing. Or maybe it was just me. Doesn't matter now. Still, I said nothing. And now Mom and Dad. She laughed bitterly. They said I should talk to you. That maybe you'd understand. That was the part that made me blink. They told her to come to me? The sane parents who never saw me unless Rachel was out of the room. The ones who applauded her every breath and asked if I was still doing that tech thing. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I didn't ask if she wanted one. I didn't sit down. Instead, I leaned against the counter and watched her twist under the weight of her own unraveling. I know I haven't always been kind to you, she said finally, her voice lower now, like she was afraid to hear her own admission. But I didn't mean it like that. I don't know. I thought you'd always be there. There it was. Not an apology. A confession. A quiet, self-centered truth. I thought you'd always be there. And that was the problem, wasn't it? She mistook my loyalty for weakness. My silence for submission. My presence for permission. I'm not, I said flatly. She blinked. Not what? I'm not there anymore. Rachel swallowed hard. But I'm your sister. You're a stranger. That landed. I walked toward the door and opened it. I hope things get better for you. I really do. But whatever this is, I gestured between us. It's not what you think it is anymore. She didn't move at first. Just sat there, staring at the floor like it might open up and swallow her. Then, slowly, she stood. "You're really not going to help me?" she whispered. "I did. For 30 years. She nodded, lips pressed tight, and walked out without another word. I closed the door behind her, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with finality. Like the last page of a book I didn't want to read again. When the door clicked shut behind her, the silence returned, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't the heavy, uncertain quiet I'd felt after leaving the family dinner. This one had weight, but it was earned. Like I'd finally cleared the room of something toxic. I stood there for a while, just listening to nothing. No raised voices. No backhanded compliments. No one trying to shrink me so they could feel bigger. Just stillness. And strangely, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt clean. She hadn't cried. Not really. Not the way she used to when she wanted something. And maybe that meant she finally understood. This wasn't about winning an argument or smoothing things over. This was the reckoning. I poured myself another glass of water and sat by the window. Outside, the street was quiet, the sky a dull gray. Ordinary, unremarkable. But it felt like mine. For once, my life felt like it belonged to me. It took less than 24 hours. The first call came from Mom. I let it ring. Then Dad. Then a group text. "Can we talk as a family?" Family. Now they remembered that word. I ignored it. That night, another text came through. This time from an unknown number. I opened it, and didn't need long to guess. It was Rachel. I told them. Everything. I didn't defend myself. They know it's my fault. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even remorse. It was a move. A last-ditch effort to pull me back into the orbit I'd finally escaped. 10 minutes later, another message. "They want you to come to dinner. Just to talk. No pressure." Funny, how the pressure always came dressed in soft words. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I was tempted, but because I realized they still didn't get it. They thought this was about a single dinner. A single comment. A single moment. But it wasn't. It was every Thanksgiving where she made me the punchline. Every birthday where my gift felt like an afterthought. Every phone call that only came when they needed something. So I typed a single reply. "I'm glad they finally see the truth. But I'm not coming back." And then I muted the thread. It's strange what you start to see when you finally step outside the roles you've been assigned. For years I told myself I was the quiet one. The patient one. The dependable background character in Rachel's shining narrative. I wore those labels like they were facts, unchangeable, fixed. But when the noise fell away, I started asking questions I hadn't dared to before. Had I ever been myself around them? I stood in front of my bathroom mirror one morning, toothbrush in hand, staring at a face I'd known my whole life and realizing I didn't really know him at all. I knew who I was to them, the other child. The safe bet. The one who didn't rock the boat. But who was I without them? I started going through old photos, me and Rachel as kids. In every shot, she was front and center, smiling big, striking a pose. I was off to the side. Sometimes smiling. Sometimes not. But always smaller. Even back then I had known. Not consciously, maybe. But my body had learned the posture of being less. I shrank so she could shine. It was easier that way. Safer. They never had to tell me outright. The unspoken always speaks loudest in families like ours. Looking back, it wasn't just Rachel. My parents fed the narrative. The way they praised her loud and publicly. The way they told people how special she was. And when they mentioned me, it was always practical. "He's doing well. Keeps to himself. Quiet boy, that one." That line used to feel like a compliment. It doesn't anymore. It was the permission slip they gave themselves to overlook me. To assume I'd never leave, never speak up, never say enough. And for a long time, I didn't. Because deep down, I wanted to be needed. Maybe even liked. Maybe even loved the way she was. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just seen. Just enough to be asked how I was doing and not have it be a transition into Rachel's newest milestone. But I see now, I was never invisible. I was ignored. There's a difference. And I let them do it, because I didn't want to be accused of bitterness. Of jealousy. The one thing Rachel always held over me. You're just jealous, she said, like it was a defense. Like it made everything else excusable. But jealousy fades when you realize you don't actually want what they have. I never wanted her life. I wanted mine to feel like it mattered. Now, it finally does. I've got friends who call just to check in. A job where they listen when I speak. A space I chose, that reflects me, books I love, art I picked, music that plays without being judged. And for the first time, I look in the mirror and see a man, not a shadow. A man who walked away from the only people who ever told him he wasn't enough. And proved them wrong by not needing them to say otherwise. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday. No return address. Just my name, written in a handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Hers. Rachel's script was always neat, deliberate. Even now, every loop and curl tried too hard to look effortless. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity still had its old grip, so I tore the seal and pulled out a single sheet of paper. No note. Just a folded printout of an email. At the top, a termination notice from her old job. Below that, a note from her landlord, dated 2 weeks prior. Final warning. Rent overdue. Eviction process pending. I stared at the paper, unmoving. There was no message attached. No plea. No apology. Just information. Laid bare. And for a moment I felt it again, that old familiar tug. The one that whispered, "She's your sister. Help her. You always do." But it was faint now. Like an echo bouncing off a wall I'd already bricked up. I set the letter down and made tea. The steam rose slowly from the mug, and I let it fill the silence. That's when I realized what this was, not a cry for help. A test. A subtle reach from someone who didn't know how to say the words, but hoped the gesture would speak for her. In the past, I would have dropped everything. Called her. Offered money. Offered space. Offered me, the way I always did. But this wasn't the past. And I wasn't that man anymore. I folded the paper neatly and tucked it back into the envelope. Then I walked it out to the trash. Because I'd already given her more than she ever deserved. And if she wanted a real connection, a real bridge back, it wouldn't come through guilt. It would come through truth. And silence, sometimes, is the only truth some people ever hear. It was late, later than anyone should be knocking. A quiet Thursday night, city lights bleeding in through the blinds, and there it was. 3 knocks. Not frantic. Not timid. Just expectant. I opened the door, already knowing who it would be. Rachel. No makeup this time. No performance. Just her, wearing the same coat she used to borrow from Mom's closet in high school. She looked smaller than I remembered. And tired. But more than that, uncertain. She didn't speak right away. Neither did I. Finally she said, "I'm not here to ask for anything." That was new. She looked past me into the apartment, like she was seeing it for the first time. "You really built something here." I nodded once. "I did." Silence again. She shifted her weight. "I don't know how to fix any of it," she said. "The things I said, the way I treated you. I don't even know why I did it. I think I just needed to feel like I was better than someone." I waited, letting the words settle. Not rushing to fill the silence for her this time. "I thought you'd always be there," she added, voice lower now. "I thought you'd forgive me." Again. I didn't move. "I know." She glanced up. Her eyes met mine. "But you didn't. And I think that's the first time anyone's ever really shown me what I am." Her voice cracked just slightly, like a window opening. "I came to say I get it now. You don't know me anything. I see that. I just..." She swallowed. I needed to say it out loud. I stood there for a moment, letting the words hang in the air. Then I stepped aside, not to invite her in, but to show her something behind me. My place. My life. Peaceful. Centered. Unburdened. Good, I said simply. Because this, I gestured lightly, isn't something I'll risk again. She nodded. Slowly. No arguments. No tears. Take care of yourself, she said quietly. You too. She turned and walked back down the hallway. No dramatic exit. No need for one. And as the door shut behind her, I didn't feel a sense of victory. I felt closure. The next morning felt light. No tension in my chest. No racing thoughts. Just quiet, steady calm. The kind that lingers, not because life is perfect, but because you've finally stopped handing the steering wheel to people who never learned how to drive with care. I poured coffee, glanced out the window, and didn't wonder what Rachel was doing. Didn't think about whether my parents were still spinning their old narratives. It didn't matter anymore. They didn't define me. They never really had. I just let them act like they did. And now? That grip was gone. I wasn't living in their shadow. I wasn't the overlooked one. I wasn't just the brother. I was me. Fully. Quietly. Unapologetically. And for once, that was more than enough. If you'd asked me a year ago what I wanted most, I probably would have said respect. Or recognition. Maybe even an apology. But standing here now, on the other side of it all, I realize it was never about them. It was about me. About finding the courage to walk away from a role I never agreed to play. About realizing that peace isn't given, it's chosen. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was accepting that they weren't going to follow. That my family, the people I bend over backwards for, might never see me the way I hoped they would. And learning how to live with that truth without letting it hollow me out. Bye-bye.